for getting this together, and anyone else from the public that is participating, we appreciate that. We have a lot of stuff to go over today. I think there's an AMAC meeting tomorrow where we'll be discussing the aquaculture regulations that are coming up. The commission did give a couple extra months to try to iron out issues that industry had with that. But today we're going to focus on the replenishment plan, and I'm going to turn this over to Andrew. He can maybe do a roll call for us and proceed with his agenda.
Thank you, Mr. France, for that. Next one, hear me all right? Okay, I'm getting a little bit echo there. If anyone's not muted there, go ahead and mute, and I'll try to get started here with the rail call. So I've got Chairman France as present. Lake Cowart.
I'm here.
Hi, Lake. How you doing there?
Doing fine, Andrew.
Good, good. John D. Maria. Okay, no D. Maria there. I believe I heard Dan Dice.
Yes.
Ernest George.
Yes.
Mr. Richard Green. Okay, he may be trying to call in later, but we'll cross that when we get to it. I believe Richard Harding, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Mr. J.C. Hudgens.
Present.
All right. Charles Ben Johnson.
Present.
All right. And I believe I saw Tommy Kellum there.
Present.
And from Virginia Beach, I think Beverly Ludford.
I'm here.
Hi, Beverly. And I think I saw Cody Metcalf on there.
Present.
All right, and again, Don won't be joining us today. I talked to him a little bit before the meeting there. And Miss Jackie Shannon, I think I saw you pop up on the video there a minute ago.
Hey, Andrew.
Hi, Jackie, how you doing there? Okay. All right, I think that counts as for a quorum there. All right, with your permission there, Chairman France, I'll go ahead and proceed into the meeting there, if that works for everybody.
That's great. Proceed.
All right. So Mr. France did touch on the agenda that there really is just one item on this day's meeting agenda, and that's the 2021 Oyster Restoration and Replenishment Plan. So I'm going to be walking through that, and I'll try to pause periodically for any questions, but I'll mostly try to work all the way through it. So if there's just a clarification, please feel free to jump in, but I'll try to get through all of it, and then we can vote on it either as a slate if everything's agreeable, or if there's any sort of discussion on particular points, we can chop it up a little bit. But I'll try to give a walkthrough of the whole plan, and then open it up for discussion. And again, I'll try to pause at points if there's any clarification, but it might all make sense if we walk all through it together, one go around first before we get into more detailed discussion on it there. All right, and again, I wanted to thank everyone for their participation and input in this meeting and these matters, as well as many others there. So that's much appreciated. All the input from this committee, not just on this issue, but over, I guess, I can actually say for years now I've been in here. So I really appreciate all the advice that comes from each and every one of you, both at these meetings and other discussions. So thanks again for that. I'm looking forward again to doing this in person, hopefully when we're establishing oyster season in August next year, but we'll see. All right, so I have a couple nice pictures from last year in here, mostly as placeholders for me. So to soften the eyes from all the graphs and charts and spreadsheets and everything else. So this is actually just some shell planting there in the Rappahannock last summer at dawn there. But anyway, so I just wanted to start out with sort of the funding source for this year's plan. So I think a VIMS colleague was saying when it comes to putting together proposals that you want to put the important stuff like the money right up front. So I took that word to advice, and here's where the funding is going to be coming from the proposed restoration replenishment this year. So it's a combination of general funds, both specifically for replenishment on public harvest areas and for restoration on areas closed to harvest. And then the capital funds are going to be primarily focused on funding projects under the Bay program. So that's sort of separate from the public harvest areas and our existing sanctuary areas. That's a separate pot of funding for sort of separate areas outside of the normal purview of the areas that are normally included in this plan. I'll go through a little bit more details on that further on down there. The Nature Conservancy, again, this year is going to be including some funding for some actual harvest areas on the seaside. And then the non-general funds is going to be primarily those user fees there. And then there's a continuation of a 3-year NOAA grant for restoration towards those Bay program restoration goals continuing this year. And that's looking like it's going to be, again, about that $500,000 level. So that's where the money is coming from. And I'll give a little bit more background. I'll kind of go over that quickly because we covered a lot of the background in last month's meeting there. But were there any questions for clarification on this before I go forward there? Okay. So again, this is updated harvest graph of the number of bushels coming off of both public and private ground for the most recent calendar year. And again, you can see a little bit of a decline there. Some of that is likely related to that carryovers from low spat sets in 2018. Also, there have been some issues with probably some underreporting for a number of reasons, COVID being one of them and our move to Fort Monroe. But it looks like over the last several years, 3, 4, 5 years, both public and private ground harvest have been relatively stable based on the amount of effort in the fishery, which is stable, and sort of where we are in terms of an oyster resource that is gradually increasing, but generally staying stable. So these fluctuations in up and down harvest, particularly given COVID-19 and this year, those are going to be primarily driven by market pressures and less about availability of the resource, particularly on public ground, but likely on private ground too. There's more oysters in these harvest numbers, and this sort of graph that's leveling off and going down likely imply. Again, I touched on this, but this is just a breakdown of containerized aquaculture, generally wild harvest off of private ground, either through seed planting or a portion of that is spat on shell, and the public harvest off of public ground there. So that sort of breaks down where that first graph is coming from and kind of clarifies what some folks view as aquaculture versus private ground harvest. Some people don't make that distinction, but I think it's kind of important to highlight that both public ground harvest, aquaculture in terms of containerized and hatchery produced, as well as the oysters that come off of private that are based on seed transplant, shell planting, or traditional harvest methods is really how we capture that. But they all tend to track up and down together because for a large part they're dependent on the same factors, be it water quality or natural spat sets. And all those either impact the hatchery or they impact what's going on the bay bottom to a certain extent. And many people that participate in the industry, as I'm sure everyone on this committee knows, participate in all three aspects, both aquaculture, wild, private, and public fishery as well. This is just an overview again of the total bay-wide averages based on a per meter density of either market smalls or spats or a volume of brown shell on the bottom. So again, you can see that as over that time period that we saw the harvest going up, the total oyster population, as indicated by our annual surveys, is also increasing at the same time. You know, not a great deal, but we're also trending up as opposed to trending down. A number of markets is staying at an average or increasing average even as harvest is increasing. So overall, that's an indicator that the fishery is stable. This is again just the sanctuary areas. So you can again see that area. That previous slide was public and or sanctuary and harvest areas combined. This is just sanctuary areas, and again, keep track of the scale on the side. That'll kind of change from slide to slide. But again, you can see that both our harvest areas and our sanctuary areas are all sort of tracking together along with our harvest numbers in a generally upwards or stable direction. And again, this is, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't go the other direction if we change things drastically or Mother Nature throws a big old monkey wrench in things, but that given the current conditions of things are stable or improving. And before I get into the meat of the plan, again, just wanted to provide some that background on really what we're doing and the reason for it is what it comes down to is we're basically, with the replenishment and restoration that we do every year, ensuring that there's just simply enough room on the actual bottom of the bay for spat to attach to in the future. And we have pretty good data to back that up, that basically at a certain liter of volume on a per meter basis, that if you're below that, there's just simply not enough room for new recruits to attach to. And that ideally at 10 liters per square meter, you have enough room where literally that's just one oyster shell thick or about 800 bushels of oyster per acre, that you have enough room when you do get a good spat set to take care of it. So really that's sort of the crux of when we replenish areas is when they get below 10, we try to target them for replenishment, and they're sort of on the priority list when they're below that 5 liter threshold, where you really see a drop off in their productivity below that point. Were there any questions on that background before I move on there? Okay. I guess one more background slide, excuse me. So this is again the average shell volume, all areas for that time frame. And again, you can see it's been relatively stable, but with that increased replenishment and good spat sets that we saw in 2019, on a bay-wide scale, we're actually at a higher level of shell volume on the bottom than we have been, you know, in more than 15 years. So that's not great news, but it's good news that we're not down close to 5, that we're actually getting up towards sort of that target of 10 liters of live oysters and shell exposed for spat to settle on a bay-wide scale. So again, there are some areas that we'll see later where we're closer to that 5 liter threshold, but on a bay-wide scale, things are okay on that front, but again, not at that ideal of 10 liters or more, even bay-wide, and much less in some areas. All right, I was gonna move into seed transplanting at this point. So I'll jump right into seed transfer, where we're planning on doing that, from where we'll be removing seed and where we'd be placing it. This is a picture of some seed being transported in the Great Wacomico from the seed areas to the harvest areas last year. So I know there'd been some discussion at the last SMAC meeting about what to do with that area in the mobjack, both toe steaks and pulses. So I included in this year's replenishment plan a proposal to remove up to 20,000 bushels of seed and oysters from this area. Likely these areas would be suitable for transplanting to most areas. It's sort of a middle salinity, and it's also a middle of the bay location, so it should be able to be moved at a relatively low price compared to some other areas. Again, these areas are supposed to be open to harvest in this coming rotation, but we have seen on both the 2020 fall survey and then a resurvey that even after very high recruitment 2 years ago, these areas don't have the shell there anymore, and they don't have the market oysters or spat there. So we suspect that it's a legal harvest activity. It's not definitive that it is, but I think the consensus was from the advisory committee at the last meeting and other meetings that this is an area that we shouldn't likely replenish anymore. And I believe there was a pretty strong proposal to move this seed from this area to somewhere else where it could have a benefit to everyone and potentially not just a few ne'er-do-wells. With that said, we don't have a concrete feel for how much seed we'll be able to remove from this area. One of the problems with areas that have been worked out of season is they're a lot patchier than we'd expect them to be. You know, if there's areas that have a lot of shell on them, they haven't been worked quite as hard, then we'll be able to move some more seed out of this area. But based on our survey, it's really patchy. So there's some bare spots right in the middle of these rocks where they were planted with shell and you wouldn't expect them. So we don't have a perfect good estimate for how much shell and seed we'd actually be able to remove from these areas unless we did a much more extensive survey or sort of got into moving it. But I think up to that 20,000 bushels of seed could be removed from this area. And I would propose that if we do go this route, moving seed from the mobjack, that at least a portion of it, probably in the 5,000 to 10,000 bushel range, be transplanted to the York River, because that's sort of the area that would normally be included in this rotation. So I would propose that if SMAC was in favor of moving the seed out of the bobjack, that be a priority area there to plant likely Timberneck and Aberdeen rock, probably with a portion of this, probably try to get at least 10,000 bushels up there, and then the remaining 10,000 would be to the same areas that we consider for seed planting out of the James River. So it sort of take some of that 20,000 that's proposed for the James River out and shift that to Mobjack. So this would likely, depending on price, be up to 30,000 bushels of seed being transplanted this year, with a portion of that, as much as we can get, coming out of the Mobjack Bay, and whatever the sort of the balance is coming out of the James River area there. So I'll go into the James River seed transplant, and again, a portion of this could be made up from that Mobjack Bay. But if we did move the Mobjack Bay seed, I think planting the York River would be a higher priority.
Do you have any idea of any kind of count at Jack right now?
The areas that do still have shell and seed on them are still in that probably upwards of 600-700 a bushel. It's just that there's a lot of bare spots in there. So what is there is still really pretty good seed. It wouldn't just be a bunch of junk, and that's sort of why that up to 20,000 bushels is there, is we wouldn't just want to move a bunch of cinders with nothing on it. So what is there does have a lot of spat and a lot of all-size oysters. It's just sort of how much of it we don't have a great feel for based on the patchiness of it.
Andrew, this is Lake
Yes.
Howard. Can I ask one question, please? The oysters in Mobjack or in York River this year haven't had the meat quality that they had last year. Have any disease tests been run on these oysters to determine whether we're picking MSX dermal up again, or something is causing those oysters not to be as fat as they were last year?
Yes, actually, I spoke earlier earlier this month with Ryan Carnegie of VIMS, and actually disease sort of across the board right now is at record lows in all areas. So there isn't a lot of disease that should be impacting these oysters in any of these areas right now. So diseases don't appear to be, at least when those samples were taken in the fall, the reason for the difference in meat quality. It may be the fresh water related, or I'm not sure the exact reasoning for it now, but I don't believe, based on the VIMS disease sampling that's been done in the York River and in the Mobjack, that's at least at the time the samples were taken last fall, the reason for it is across the board diseases, both in prevalence right now are lower than they have been at record low levels this year.
So it's definitely not disease then. It's caused the meat quality not to be there.
Well, I guess I wouldn't want to say definitively, but it doesn't look that way unless it's specifically been tested those oysters for disease. But it doesn't look like it is disease that would be the reason for the meat quality at this point. No.
Andrew, JC.
Go ahead there.
Andrew, what type of gear would you propose to take these seed oysters up with?
Generally, ordinary dredges is when we're moving a lot of seed from one of these areas. It's normally in a scraper dredge area. That would be the route that we go. So it's pretty deep. So we probably put this out for bid for 2 or 3 boats to work on and try to move it relatively quickly.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Andrew,
Were there any
you
other
can,
questions? Go ahead.
yeah, I have something. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you there.
Okay, yeah. I think there was some issues with some night dredging at Mob Jack on some of these bars. I think some people were brought before the commission on that. So that has been a problem. I'd like to hear some more comments on making this a seed area and moving these shell from the rest of the SMAC committee, if they wouldn't mind.
So this is Tommy. To that point, one of the concerns I have, Wayne, is I think that when this is being moved, that it's not only market oysters, it's shell, seed, all of it's probably being relocated close by somewhere in the vicinity. So, I hate to give up on a productive area, but I think we should isolate whether we're losing the shell and the seed before we have an opportunity to relocate it ourselves. And just my feeling based on Andrew's comments about the holes and what's there. It sounds like it's being moved in mass quantity as opposed to just moving markets out of it. But I would just hate to see us continue to work on it as a seed area and lose the shell in the process. But that's just my thought.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I can kind of put a number to that. I mean, it's not a perfect estimate, but since last year, it looks like there's about 5,000 or 10,000 bushels of everything, seed, shell, markets, small, spat, that isn't there anymore, sort of in that range. So that's sort of what we're seeing in terms of the amount that's left. Not definitively from poaching, but it looks like it is that's the smell of gunpowder is in the air, if not a smoking gun. But that's what it looks like, that at least that amount, based on our survey, isn't where we left it. And that's sort of the reason for bringing this up to SMAC, that this area, hasn't produced as expected before. And again, sort of given this committee an opportunity and an update that it doesn't look like it's going to produce what we anticipated again this year, and sort of the best route forward to maximize the investment that we've already made in this area. And again, I have the same reservations and have confidence that our law enforcement is trying to solve the issue there. But I guess we have to deal with the reality that this area hasn't produced in the past. It's a hard area for enforcement, and we have potentially an opportunity to make the most out of what's there by moving as much as we can. Again, it's added cost. It would be preferable to leave it there and have it available for harvest for next year, but to run the risk of having it disappear, again, I think that's why SMAC sort of has those same concerns.
And Andrew, JC.
Yeah, go ahead there.
Yeah, do you have the numbers, from the MobJack for the last couple of openings that we've had? I know I didn't work the last one, but I don't think it lasted a week, if I can remember correctly. I do know a few people went down there and worked it, and, um, probably prior to that, it was probably 5 or 6 years of break in there that before we worked it, and that wasn't too bad. But I was just wondering, what came off of it in the last two openings, and say since 2010, and what exactly what you felt like happened there, because they're certainly not growing and not there, and so I was just concerned about that part of it.
I don't have that, the actual harvest amount offhand there, for what specifically came out of the Mob Jack when it was last open 2 years ago. I can try to find that for us, but I did pull up this slide here that shows, the survey data from this year. And again, I took the spat out of this, because even with those in there, it really kind of throws off this, because we did get a phenomenal spat set in 2019, and they're still there in 2020. But you can see that we planted it in the fall of 2018 here, and by our survey in 2019, we are up over 12 liters of brown shell volume. That's that gray line there per square meter, and it wasn't open to harvest, and now we're at less than 5 in these areas. So,
Gotcha.
I mean, literally like half the shell that we planted isn't showing up on the survey there.
Okay.
So that's sort of the concern there. And it basically looks like this area was worked, even though it wasn't worked. And on top of that, more of the shell is missing than you would expect if it had actually been worked too.
Okay, Andrew, thank you for some of that clarification. I know before you started with him, Dr. Wesson was expressing the same concerns and the same problems uh, long before now. So it's an ongoing problem. It seems like to me.
I would agree there. I think if you look back through our data there, that in 2015, again, we kind of saw something similar to 2019, and I believe we had planned on leaving one of those areas out of the rotation because of that spat set, to try to give that an opportunity. And then again, it just didn't play out, and we might not have had, again, the same sort of blatant evidence that we have of things not being as they should be. But it's hard to think anything else that's happened to it based on those just the numbers of what's missing off the bottom without it being open to harvest there. So I think it did happen before, probably, but something definitely went on again this time around, almost assuredly.
Andrew, would you like us to move on this specific item, or would you like to just hold off and do it as a whole?
I don't mind taking a separate motion on this, since there's been a lot of discussion already. If that's the will of the committee, that would be fine to vote on this piece, up or down, since it is something that's largely new to the replenishment plan.
Hello.
It's up to SMAC. Hello.
I've been I've been trying to get out. I can't. I've been wanting to say something. I must be
Okay,
muted.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I would just. I'd like to just to say I'm following with with moving this. I think we've all been discussed this enough that it's too much money's been going into my object with not enough results. The only I would like to ask, one of the questions was, do we want to make this into a seed area? Does this mean that we're going to start planting shells back here and try to get seed off of it? I mean, because if that's the case, I mean, it sounds like they're taking shell. You know, if poaching's the case, it sounds like they're taking everything. Well, they're probably just as apt to take a bunch of seed shells as they do just regular shells or just I don't I just wanted to know, are we planning on putting more money into making this a seed area, or are we just going to take this and go with it, with a one-time thing?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It seems to me that evidence shows that it doesn't make any difference if it's brown shell, it's seed, or it's large oysters. It's all going away from there.
Yeah,
Andrew, what's your take on this?
I think that what I would propose for this year is to not plant anything back, is to remove what we can from there, and not plan on replenishing it at this point, until there's sort of some sort of resolution for what's going on there in the future. I'm not exactly sure what that would look like, but at this point, I think Dan's point's well taken, that it might not be the best place to invest our limited replenishment budget in if this continues to be a problem there. So I think what I would propose is, as part of this plan, would be further on down the road, is to not replenish these areas this year, even though they're in need of it, but to save that replenishment for other areas, and again, just move what we can out of this area this year, and then still have it open to harvest as part of the rotation next year. Just I don't think it would hurt it any at that point to clean up anything that was missed and give people an opportunity for whatever is left after we move as much as we can out of there, and then reassess whether we keep replenishing this area in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I think we've discussed this one into the other. I think Andrew's come up with a plan. The chair will accept a motion on this if one of the SMAC members would like one.
I got a question for Andrew.
Sure.
Andrew,
Go ahead there.
hey, what do you propose to do with Browns Bay? What's going on there? I mean, we've knocked it, and it continues to, to show some oysters and all that. What do you propose to do with that?
I think that's a little bit of a wait and see there. Is I wouldn't propose necessarily moving everything out of there at this point, but I think that's an area that has sort of been a de facto sanctuary area here that we've left closed to harvest. So okay. I think in terms of this year, we probably wouldn't put any shell on it, and sort of decisions about its future, I think we would kind of leave for the future there. But I don't think there would be a strong push for putting shell there. Maybe some large rocks, but at this point, there wouldn't be any plan for Browns Bay in this plan.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to make a motion that we move 20,000 bushels of seed oysters out of the Mopjack. Do you want to include that motion, Andrew, with the James River, the 20,000 out of the James River also?
We can keep that separate there, I guess. And it's up to you though, really. I haven't really gone over that, but we can do up to that amount. That works for the plan there. If that works for you, Mr. Francis.
That does work. We have a motion from Mr. Hudgens to remove 20,000 bushels of seed from Mobjack. Do we have a second for that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Kellum. Any further discussion? Discussion, I will ask Andrew to call the roll.
All righty. I will do so there. Jackie Shannon.
Aye.
Cody Metcalf.
4.
Beverly Ludford,
Aye.
Tommy Kellum,
Aye.
Ben Johnson,
Aye.
J.C. Hudgens,
Aye.
Richard Harding,
Aye.
recalling Richard Green. Not sure if he's here. Okay. Ernest George,
Aye.
Dan Dice,
Aye.
recalling John D. Maria. Okay. Lake Cowart
Aye.
and Chairman France.
Aye.
All right. And that was unanimous there to move that 20,000 bushels out of there.
Andrew,
Go ahead there.
Richard Green had texted me that I vote his proxy in favor of this. I guess he's had some adverse effects from a second COVID shot, so that's why he's not on the call.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Tommy. Okay, with that, I think we can kind of clarify the where this seed goes as part of the next item there for the James River section, if that's agreeable to the chairman there.
That is agreeable. Proceed.
Okay, so as we've done in previous replenishment plans, we proposed moving a small amount of seed to Potomac tributaries. Again, in the past, we've done this primarily from the hand-tong harvest areas, but the cost to moving that seed has become somewhat prohibitive in recent years. And as a result, we haven't been able to complete that portion of the replenishment program. But we were able to take advantage of a shell plant in the Nansemond Ridge area that has had a number of years of good recruitment. So this was an area that was planted separate from the larger Nansemond Ridge. Again, this is, if you're able to see my screen there, the graph on the left is that recent shell plant. And again, take note of the scale on the left-hand side there is this is an area that's seen very good recruitment. I actually took the spat out of this graph because they were sort of off the charts, so to speak. But again, you can see that this area that was planted specifically for this reason is got a considerably higher number of small oysters and brown shell volume compared to the larger Nansemond Ridge area. So this would be an area that was again replanted after we moved that seed in 2019 and in 2020 and expanded a little bit. So this would be the area that, depending on what comes out of the mob jack, we propose sort of moving the balance of seed from. And just to give folks an idea of the scale, you can see that large red arrow is pointing to that recent shell plant on Nansemond Ridge. It's originally about 20 acres, and we expanded it to about 30 acres. So this is the area where the seed would be removed from. That larger shape there is the area that we survey, close to 200 acres on the larger Nansemond Ridge. So this area wouldn't have any seed removed from it, just this small area that's been planted sort of, I don't want to say specifically for this purpose, but originally because we wanted to plant some shell there, and then specifically for this purpose afterwards because it's done so well. So this area has had 3 years of heavy shell planting on it and 2 years of seed removal. And this would be a proposed third year. And again, the areas that we'd like to transplant this seed from, if we move from the mob jack, would be, again, the priority would be getting some on the timberneck, which would probably be in a new or in an upcoming rotation there, that lower area on your screen. We'd likely focus any shell planting we did this year on pages, as that was just open to hand scrape. And then we may, depending on how much seed comes out of the mob jack, look at putting some of that on Aberdeen, which was open to hand tong this most recent year. So that would be the priority for some of the Mobjack seed coming out of the Mobjack to go into the York. The upper Rappahannock sort of areas that we've been planting seed would be the priority for either that James River seed or the Mobjack seed, depending on how much and price. I'm realizing I'm missing a slide there. That was the other aspect of the recent seed transplanting is the seed that was transplanted to the Nominee last year. We had 2 areas that were planted, the Deans and the Cut up in the Nominee. And on this year's fall, or the 2020 fall dredge survey, the area locally known as Deans appeared to have significantly less seed on it than the other area that we planted. So we suspect that this was a result of illegal harvest activity. This is again one of those areas where it's kind of out there, not under a lot of eyes. So it's an area where, based on our dredge survey and a subsequent side scan sonar done with law enforcement, that the seed that was transplanted there isn't where we left it either. So we propose transplanting seed this year, probably likely to those areas that were open to harvest in the cone there, probably about 5,000 bushels to those areas. And look at in a future meeting with when we go over the harvest plans, look at adjusting the rotations there and possibly opening up the Nominee early to harvest and taking it out of that rotation schedule and looking at exploring some other options to keep in the Potomac tributaries. So that would be the Potomac tributary that we planted. And then again, we discussed at the last SMAC meeting, planting some seed on areas in the upper Pocomoke furthest from the Maryland-Virginia line. So luckily this area sort of off this peninsula here closest that you're seeing, this is sort of Saxes Harbor there. That gray line is the Virginia-Maryland line, and we'd likely plant it in this area sort of at the top of the screen there. And again, I talked to Don Porter about this earlier and try to coordinate with him on an area that would be easy to observe from shore there to keep an eye on any seed that was transplanted to this area. So those would be, again, trying to move up to that 30,000 bushel mark, either from a combination of the Mobjack and 20,000 bushels from here. Probably we wouldn't get 20,000 from both or have the funding for it, but look at moving up to that 30,000 amount, with the split being roughly 10,000 in the York, 10,000 in the Rappahannock, 5,000 to this area, and 5,000 to the Potomac trips. So that would be the split on seed transport for this year as part of this proposed replenishment plan. Were there any questions or clarification needed on that?
Yes.
Go ahead there, Dan.
On the upper part of the Pocomoke, one of the things that me and Don both talked about in the last meeting is that this, if we're going to spend, keep spending money on this needs to be in a regular rotation. It's not in a regular rotation. Before anything gets spent on it, are you committing to take this into a regular rotation, or or is this a wait and see kind of thing?
Well, I don't think I can commit strongly one way or another on that. I think that we would definitely propose that this area be open to harvest if we're moving seed up there. But how establishing a regular rotation in terms of every other year or every third year, or whether this is a hand tong area or a hand scrape area, I think that would be open for further discussion. But we wouldn't want to move this up there and for the purpose of harvesting it and not harvest it. And I think we've been on at least a de facto sort of 2-year rotation or 3-year rotation on these areas here recently. So we look at definitely harvesting this area in the future, but sort of I don't think I can commit to a firm plan on it's going to be open every second year or every third year at this point, and to what gear type.
Can I ask Wally? I mean, every other place on the bay has got it. We might not agree with all the places that's got it. I know, we've heard enough complaints out of the Rappahannock that it's every 3 years. You know, but every place has got its rotation that we know 6 years down the road what we're going to be working for the next 6 years. Why? I mean, I just don't understand why the holdup, is on this. I mean, we've all seen bad times hit these places, hit our own places. It was just 2 or 3 years ago that, the Rappahannock looked pretty bleak, from all the rain that we had in that August or September. It didn't affect the rotation. The rotation was still there. I just don't understand why there can't be a set rotation on this area.
Well, I guess it's just that we haven't set one yet. So I think that's the main reason for it is there hasn't been I haven't developed a proposal personally on what the rotation would look like in this area specifically, and I think I'm open to doing that again, but it would sort of be a little bit complex to look at which areas would be included in it, but it's something that we could do at the future. But I'm not. I guess my short answer is I'm not ready to say what that rotation would be, because I haven't personally formulated some proposals on it that would come through this committee and the commission. So I think that I could agree on a staff level to work with SMAC and the commission on developing a plan for establishing some rotational harvest in that area. But I couldn't say today what that plan would be. But I think that I take your point that we don't want to move seed up there if it's not going to be open to harvest. But I do say that I would commit to recommending that this area be open to harvest in the future. But when and how often, I don't think we've established through this committee and the commission yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do. I understand that. But I do. I think this place, with SMAC, I mean, not so much me. I don't really know that much about up that way. I mean, but, with the Saxon Islanders, I think it needs to be, I think something needs to soon be said on this. I just think this is too flip-floppy, too wishy-washy. And now that we're going to start spending seed on it, which is fine. I'm not against the seed. I look at this as as the business that it is. We don't need to, I don't want to get into spending money on a place like we've done in Mobject, and it don't amount to a hill of beans. But I do think, like maybe this time next year we can start discussing a permanent rotation on this area.
No, I think that would be agreeable on at least speaking for myself there. I don't want to speak for any other folks other than me at this point, but I'm always open to working with SMAC to improve things as opposed to just stand in the way of change for the sake of being not open to change. So if it makes sense based on a resource management perspective and on the monetary investment perspective and everything else that goes into these, I would definitely be in support of working on developing a proposal for this area, given the investment in it.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's a good idea, Andrew. I think if we can, in the future, SMAC and the commission work on some kind of plan to, maybe work these into a road area and give the people in this general area that work here kind of an idea of what the future brings for them and a little stability in that fishery.
No, agreed there. It also having I guess the part of the issue is I think in the past that there was some hesitancy to replenish this area. So I guess the hesitancy of working into a rotation was we were, I think, on a staff level, at least I don't want to speak for my predecessor there, but I think there's always a hesitancy to work an area into a rotation if there's no plans on putting something back there. So I think if there's plans on putting something back, it makes sense to work it into a rotation. I know that's a little bit of a chicken and the egg type argument there, but I think you can't really have a rotation without replenishment. So if we're going to be planting seed and moving shell, then that opens that area up to that idea, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Thank you.
All right. Do we want to keep on going through this plan there, or we can do that and wait till the end there, or did we want to take a vote on that? I'll pause there and leave it up to the committee there.
I don't see why I just can't do a consensus from the committee just to pursue and start the ball in motion, maybe rotating these areas over in Pocomoke.
I can take that sort of as general consensus there, and keep on going on with the plan to take it as for a vote once we go through it. Does that work for you, Chairman France?
Yes, sir, that works just fine.
All righty. So this brings us to I guess the larger ticket items. Oh, one other thing was that I forgot to mention there is I know in the past we've done some discussion on the seed removal in the Piankatank and Great Wacomico River. I know in the past we'd had a program where seed was removed for private planting on private ground, and 2 bushels of shells were planted on those areas. Again, these areas haven't really quite been producing what they should be in terms of getting up near those target numbers running that program there. So staff wouldn't propose that program being offered again this year. But I think these areas would be good areas to look at, again, exploring future options for consideration of the SMAC and the commission of maybe opening up some of these areas to a quota managed public market or seed harvest, similar to what we have in the James River. So sort of look at expanding how that quota system and public harvest works in the James. But again, I don't think that's something to tackle today, but just wanted to put that out there for the members of this committee to start thinking about at a later date, but not offering that seed transfer program this year, but look at exploring the option of another public seed fishery, closely managed one with a quota similar to what we have in the James River. So that would be a proposal for future consideration in terms of a seed area. All right, now on to shell planting in the bay and tributaries. So again, that's some shell being planted on the seaside last year, that picture that was just up there. There is a packet in here that I emailed out that shows all the priority areas. But it looks like, given the current budget of about $2.5 million for replenishment, that we'd be able to plant somewhere in that 600 to 800 acre range for on harvest areas. And again, some areas, a few areas might be replenished on the sanctuary areas as well. But the majority of this replenishment funds for general funds, all that $2.5 million would go into harvest areas. Some of the general funds for the restoration would help maintain some sanctuaries. Most of that's going to be alternative substrate that I touch on later in the presentation. But again, if we can put some hash fine shell that's a byproduct of this, or if we're in the area and we can bring the total per unit cost down, we may put a little bit of the reef shell on these sanctuary areas too. But the majority of this, about 700 acres, likely with funding, would go to replenishing harvest areas. And about 11 acres would be planted with shell on the eastern shore, primarily using TNC funding. They were actually able to provide some planting on harvest areas last year. So on the seaside, it's all hand harvest for the most part. And the Nature Conservancy actually funded some replenishment of harvest areas last year. And we'd likely throw in about $100,000 of general funds for restoration or on sanctuary areas over there. So a little bit of a role reversal on the Eastern Shore. But again, this supports about somewhere 20 to 30 folks in harvest over there each year by hand on the seaside. So that's where the funding would come for shell planting. And again, this is sort of the whole idea and goal of shell planting is to maintain sort of that minimum 5 liters of brown shell volume per square meter, and ideally shoot for that 10 liters, just so there's simply enough room for oyster spat to attach to. And again, 10 liters of brown shell is really just about 800 bushels per acre. So we usually plant at a rate of about 1,000 bushels, which is really just one oyster shell thick directly on top of harvest areas to maintain them. So based on our fall survey, there's close to 2,000 acres that are below that 10-liter threshold, and then a little over 1,000 acres that are at that 5-liter threshold or close to it, and we're just opened up for harvest this year. Based on that and our funding, it looks like we'll probably be able to plant right around a little over 700 acres this year, and now I'll go through sort of area by area where those shells would go. So just as a quick overview, these are the areas that were open to harvest this year. Those are highlighted in the yellow polygons there. The blue are all public grounds. Starting in the James River, this is an area that is actually in pretty good shape. We've done a lot of shell planting there the last 2 or 3 years. And again, this area doesn't appear to have been extremely heavily worked this year and has had really consistent and good recruitment. So most of the upriver areas are in pretty good shape and likely don't need much in the way of shell planting this year. We would focus on planting shell on that area that we planted in Nansman Ridge. And again, try to do some replenishment outside of just the area that we removed seed. The Nansman Ridge was an area that was probably worked before the emergency closure the heaviest this year and was producing sort of the best quality oysters. So we'd likely give that a little bit of a boost. And it's also one of the areas that based on our survey, is in the most need of shell planting. So probably close to a 50-50 split in terms of the volume of shell, but about 20 acres planted on the seed area and probably in that 40 to 60 acres planted on the rest of Nansman Ridge would be the plan for the James River this year. If we did any spring surveys in the area and there were any particularly low spots, that's a list of the areas most in need in the James. But again, all of those are actually pretty close to that 10-liter threshold and in pretty decent shape based on our fall survey this year. This is the York and Mobjack combined. The areas that were most in need of shell planting really were Toastake, which is that area we talked about that we're planning on removing seed from, and it shouldn't be in as bad shape as it was, and that area that we don't really open to harvest and haven't done a lot of extensive replenishment work in Browns Bay. So we wouldn't actually propose on doing any more replenishment activity in those areas. Probably most of the shell planting, given that Timberneck was planted last year, and that Pages was open to harvest this year, most of this 113 acres would be focused on planting Pages. Aberdeen was open to harvest, but only by hand tong. And this area, if we did move some seed out of the Mobjack, which it looks like we're going to do, would get some seed oysters, shell planting on Pages there in the middle. And we may do some, if we're getting a lot out of the Mobjack, again, put some seed oysters on the area there, Timberneck in the lower area, but focus most of the shell planting here on Pages and try to shoot for right around 113 acres there of shell planting this year in New York. And again, we probably do a little bit of shell planting, probably about 20 or so acres of this would be on some non-harvest areas there below the bridge. So not a lot of shells there. Most of these would be going on the harvest areas, and that would be separate funding for restoration on the non-harvest Again, Piankatank and Deep Rock, a couple of the seed areas that we've worked in the past are still not doing great, so we may try to do some light replenishment on those areas, and do a few acres there on Deep Rock as well. Beverly, sort of that upper area of Deep Rock is in pretty good shape, but there's a couple spots mixed in there in that upper area that could use a little bit more replenishment. And again, while we're in this area, put a few shells on there, but not a lot of replenishment on those, as these areas are actually all in pretty decent shape. So maybe a little bit less than that 1,000 bushels an acre on these areas. Again, the Rappahannock, shoot for about 200 acres. There's a list there on the left of the areas most in need. A lot of these acres are on Moratico, so we obviously wouldn't plant all of Moratico. It's really far upriver, but we shoot to get about 200 acres in the Rappahannock, mostly in Area 6 that was open to harvest, but some of those other areas that are getting a little low while we're in the area as well. But again, shoot for about 200 acres of shell planting there in the Rappahannock, with sort of Area 6 and that Temple Bay area that wasn't open but is sort of in need. And some of the other areas there that are below that 5 liter threshold that aren't on the rotation coming into harvest next year. So most of these were in area, I guess it is area 4 and 6 is where most of these areas are as well. So sort of focus on that in the areas in area 6 that were open to harvest here recently and are most in need. So about 200 acres there in the Rappahannock. Great Wacomico, again, about 14 acres there, those areas that are in most need. And we may do a little bit more in the area depending on how they're looking after the harvest season, since we're going to be over there. But at least 14 acres there in the Great Wacomico, with Dameron Marsh and Mill Creek sort of being the priority. And then in order of least shell to most shell, working through those other areas while we're there. Pocomoke and Tangier, again, try to shoot for about 250 acres there. We may have to adjust that a little bit. We wouldn't plan on planting Parkers. I heard Dan on that one last year, but these would be the priority areas that we'd shoot for this year in the Pocomoke. So
we got Parker's highlighted there.
Well, that's just to let you know that it's in need there, Dan. So
it ain't never worked. That's what I've been trying to tell you. It covers.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Those are just the areas most in need there, but 250 acres, not including Parkers, would be the areas to plant there. So area 10 there, see if we can sneak some up into those shallow areas up the Pocomoke. But again, most areas that were open this year in area 13, Burton Marshalls are a little bit low on shell there as well, but it would be Shell Rock, Burton Marshalls, and the Pocomoke. And then, if we're in the area, try to get a little bit here on Thoroughfare in California, if we're in the area, and going to be over that way. Try to make the most of it when we have a barge load over there. But that's the area in terms of priorities in need of shell, the most in need from highest to lowest there. All right, and that's shell planting proposed for this year. And this next section is going to be primarily alternative culch projects or stone. That's a picture of some stone that was planted last year. Again, we have permits in place for some harvest areas as well. So I like to keep those permits up to date in case there are any issues with the shell dredging or shell planting programs that we have, so that we can shift some areas and expand that program to stone. So those areas are permitted. We may try to do a few acres if we can in these areas, but we focus most of this work on restoration areas, primarily in the Great Wacomico, the Piankatank, and the York. But again, if there were issues with our shell planting, we have some areas permitted for planting stone on as part of the replenishment program. So again, here's the funding, and this is mostly going to be that capital funding in terms of the restoration areas, and it's mostly going to be going into stone in the Piankatank, the Great Wacomico, and the York River. These are going to be on areas separate to our current harvest areas, and it's separate money from what funds the harvest areas as well. But that's where the funding breakdown would be for the restoration planting. And again, it sort of varies price to price based on how large of rock you use and how far it's being transported. Again, there. And if anyone wants to take a pretty far dive down into the restoration area, there's a lot of detailed plans that have been produced for these areas targeted under the Bay program, but this is just a brief overview of the areas planned for restoration in the Piankatank, or areas that have already been completed. This includes our seed areas, so we got credit for those, but they're not part of any planned stone planting there. Great Wacomico, again, this would be a priority for most of that stone planting. This is just a map from the Bay program goals. And then the York River. So this is below the York River Bridge and the harvest areas. These are the areas where stone planting could take place. It's mostly sandy bottom, and this would be separate from the replenishment and part of the overarching Bay program goals that are funded with that capital funds and the general fund specifically for oyster restoration. If anyone wants to look really in depth at the planning for that, there's a link to it there. And then in terms of this group, and what we've talked about in the past, the Pocomoke Sound, that project that has been much discussed and hasn't got off the ground beyond moving the shell and seed from the Maryland line areas. It looks like everything has lined up, both staff-wise, permit-wise, and now finally funding-wise, to be able to complete this project. So this would be using restoration general funds, and this would be constructing basically along this border with Maryland and Virginia an alternative substrate, large stones, oyster sanctuary, and use it as an opportunity to thoroughly and well mark the Maryland and Virginia line while we're over there using that restoration funding. So it would be sort of a 2-for-1 project, and it would mean that anyone even just crossing the line with a dredge on board, that would be a misdemeanor at least, and it would well mark the line and put a sanctuary in an area that really we've been hesitant to replenish because of those cross-border concerns, but that would also hopefully provide some opportunity for broodstock to develop in close proximity to the rotational harvest areas that we'll be working on in the future. So that's sort of similar to how the Rappahannock works, is it has those sanctuary areas intermixed with its harvest rotation areas. So this would be, again, part of that larger strategy to come up with a similar program there in the Pocomoke Sound for that rotational harvest combined with adjacent sanctuary areas. So it looks like we're in good shape with funding to actually get this project in the water this year. And that's really the extent of the plan that's proposed to be heard at this next month's commission meeting, but wanted to have SMAC's input and opinions on this before we brought it to there. So that's all I have for this at this point, and would be glad to try to answer any questions the committee may have.
Any questions from the committee to Andrew on the new replenishment program?
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm not hearing any. Yes, please.
Hey, this is Jackie
Yeah.
Shannon. I don't have any questions. Just wanted to thank Andrew for putting in the work on the state line sanctuary.
Yes, this
I
is Richard
agree.
Hardin. I got a question, sir, if you don't mind. Andrew,
Go ahead, Richard.
yes, sir. Thank you. Would you and the staff, maybe not now, but in the future, consider about moving some seed from Great Wacomico to Blackberry Hang? Just want to know what your thoughts is on that.
I think it's definitely something we could look at in the future there in terms of the Great Wacomico seed areas and how we look at sort of managing those areas going forward. So I think that if you're fortunate, you get a really good spat set out there in the Blackberry area if you plant some shell. So if we can plant shell and get the same number of oysters, it ends up being cheaper. But if you know, we give a little boost to that area with some seed based on the need and the funds, I think that it's something to look at there, because I understand your concern about some of these areas, particularly the seed areas, not growing out there. But we were able to do that last year to some of the harvest areas further down the Great Wacomico. But we'd be open to looking at that as part of potentially a way to manage the seed area in the Great Wacomico in the future.
I appreciate it, Andrew. They just grow so much faster out in Blackberry. So that's my reasoning.
No, I got you there. It's a big part of the bay. A lot of water coming down the Potomac there.
I have something, Andrew.
Sure, go ahead there, Dan.
Just on the area, you know, there where you wanted to plant the seed up at the upper part of Potomac or Pocomoke. I would very strongly recommend having a conversation with Don if he feels up to it, or maybe he could get you in touch with somebody else on where to plant this seed. That's a tricky area up there. I mean, I've not worked up there a whole lot, but it's, you know, it could be the difference in, it could be a big difference in you could be 100 foot off and it goes in that black inky mud and nobody will ever get nothing out of it. But I would just recommend, you know, that you know, a conversation needs to be had on the safety of it as far as the poaching goes, and then what, you know, where actually to put it. I think that would be, you know, we've seen the seed what happened to Shell Rock this year. Shell Rock looks 1,000 times better than it did 2 years ago. Same way, I think, from what I hear, Area 7 and Rappahannock, you know, I think it's real critical that it goes, you know, that it gets on a place that produces something. And I would just, you know, recommend to have a conversation with the boys up there.
No, absolutely there. I mean, I'm not nearly as intimately familiar as those guys who work it every day, but I used to run out of Saxus fairly often when I lived over there in Exmoor, but we'll definitely work with them, and always whenever we're planting this seed, we get a set of tongs out and poke the bottom and make sure we're not putting it in the mud. So and we have those areas pretty well mapped out, but I think I hear you on wanting to get the most for it, and definitely agree that those areas are, I mean, you saw the map, long and skinny enough that that if you're off by 100 feet, you can miss. So we'll make sure we're out there when the seed's going over, and make sure we coordinate with Don and company on making sure it's in an ideal spot, both for a protection and ensuring that it doesn't sink on us. We wanna put it on the best parts of those rocks where it's within easy reach of legal harvest.
Right.
As opposed to burying it in the mud where it's no good for anybody.
Also, with the tugging company, we've also, you know, we've all heard the stories. There can be issues with them, especially up that way where it gets so, you know, it gets so shallow. But all right, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. job well done. I'd like to thank the SMAC committee members for your input. It's appreciated, and it is not sent to a deaf ear. Andrew does a good job of listening to what we say and working it into the programs. Andrew, do you have anything to add before we make a motion to accept?
Just to echo what you said there, I really do appreciate everyone on this committee's input, and going forward, looking forward to continuing to work with everybody here.
The chair will accept the motion to accept this as we have amended a little bit of it and as presented by Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, no, JC.
Go ahead, JC.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we accept the 2021 oyster replenishment restoration as per delivered by Mr. Andrew Button.
Thank you, JC. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a second. Any more discussion before we vote? Not hearing any. Andrew, you mind calling the roll?
Absolutely there. Jackie Shannon,
Aye.
Cody Metcalf,
Aye.
Beverly Ludford,
Aye.
Tommy Kellum,
Abstain, and would like to disclose that Kellum Brothers would possibly participate in the work.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Ben Johnson,
Aye.
J.C. Hudgens,
Aye.
Rich Harding,
Aye.
I don't think we have Richard Green there. Double checking. Richard Green. Okay. Ernest George,
Aye.
Dan Dice,
Aye.
John D. Maria. Okay. Lake Coward
Aye.
and Chairman France.
Aye.
All right. I think that's all the business I had to bring before the committee today. Thank you for your input and participation.
What time is the AMAC meeting? Is tomorrow, right?
That's correct. It's going to be, I guess, the joint meeting or ad hoc committee meeting with AMAC and SMAC, and that is going to be from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind the SMAC committee member, we voted very strongly to send this back to the commission, and if you have any input or would like to say anything, please be on the line on the meeting tomorrow. It's very important. SMAC gave the commission the feeling that it hadn't been vetted enough, and so we're getting a chance to do that. And if you want to do that, please participate tomorrow. And That's all I have to say, except for thank you all for your participation today. Thank you,
Wayne.
Andrew. And,
Wayne,
yeah, please.
This is Blake. Yeah, can I ask one question? Will the
Yes,
of course,
sir.
I think the AMAC committee is made up maybe of 6 individuals tomorrow, but will the public, the other members of this committee and the AMAC committee have an opportunity to speak to these issues tomorrow as well?
Andrew,
Yeah, no,
I
that's
think
fine.
you can answer that.
I believe that'll be the setup for tomorrow. Is this ad hoc committee will be the ones, I guess, bringing something forward, is my understanding. But AMAC and SMAC are sort of invited for input at this meeting tomorrow. So to try to collectively work on it all together. But yeah, no, AMAC and SMAC will be there'll be opportunities to speak to these lease renewal guidelines at tomorrow's meeting. Yes.
Okay.
And could you remind Andrew of members of the committee or ad hoc committee?
I'm sorry there, you were breaking up a little bit there.
Could you remind us which members of the ad hoc committee are on the ad hoc committee?
The SMAC person on that committee, I believe, is Ernest George was appointed to the ad hoc committee there from SMAC.
Any other questions or discussions before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
I have
So
a question for Andrew. That's all right.
Beg your pardon, I couldn't hear you.
You got me now?
I hear you.
I have a question for Andrew.
Yes,
Andrew,
please.
have you
Question
given
for
any more
Andrew.
thought- Andrew, have you given any more thought to open up the seating in the James River for Maryland? I know the shaft hangers did not get to work in the James River a whole lot this year due to very limited amount of market.
I think I heard that about James River seed harvest, and the commissioner has made the decision to leave the James River seed areas closed to the harvest of seed oysters for out-of-state transport for this season. So I think it's something that we can address as part of the harvest season discussions, in a few months. But I think at this point, that's the decision from the commissioners to leave these areas closed to harvest.
Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
This is Blake Coward. I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Coward. We have a second.
I'll second, Wayne.
Thank you, JC. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. All right. Thank you all very much. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you, Andrew, again. And maybe I'll hear from some of you guys tomorrow.
Chairman France and members of the committee and everyone else who's calling in there. Appreciate it. Thank you.